Welcome to another edition of LaborVision. I am glad everybody is able to tune in. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and follow the podcast. We also have, we're on Facebook at LaborVision Podcast, and also follow us on Twitter at LaborVision, and that is SEE LaborVision, all one word. Today, I am thrilled to welcome the Congresswoman of the 13th Congressional District, Rashida Tlaib. Can everybody give her a hand? Oh,
that's awesome. I was just telling the brother, I need one of those. That little like music in the background, clapping once in a while.
You need a lot of claps. And first of all, let me say this. Thank you for doing this interview. And as we talked earlier, this is not my first time interviewing you. You have been really great. And also, the seat that you hold used to be John Conyers' seat. Yes, sir. And just for another history's sake, John Conyers, whenever I would go talk with him, his door was always open. And you have not closed that door. So thank you, thank you.
Every letter that leaves my office, residents will tell you the last thing I say is my door is always open to you. And, so me staying rooted in community also means, really leaning on ways to communicate with my neighbors. And this is a way to doing that. It can't only be these national media outlets. It has to be, community-based programs like this that are educational, that are really thoughtful and really speak the way many of us speak about issues. And I think that's really important, that they're not sound bites. They're actually real life experiences.
So can you tell our audience, what is your district? What does it cover?
Oh, my district, and thank God for redistricting reform in Michigan. We're going to finally have an independent commission of citizens that will redraw the lines for our, not this time around, but at least after the 2020 census. We'll at least now have a much more, fair democracy and process here in Michigan. But right now, my district is 12 incredibly beautiful neighborhoods and communities across the Wayne County. I go from the east side of Detroit all the way to Romulus. I have Western Wayne communities, downriver, and a huge chunk of Detroit. One of the areas is, places like Inkster and Redford Township and Wayne, Michigan, and Garden City, Westland. I only have half of Dearborn Heights. I don't have the other half. That's how badly gerrymandered it is. I share Dearborn Heights with Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. And then I have this beautiful city called Highland Park. HP is every time I walk into the city. Oh, yeah. Yes. And then, of course, just neighborhoods from all over, Detroit. But yeah, Melvindale, the downriver communities include Melvindale, Romulus, River Rouge, and Ecorse.
So let's talk about your road to Congress. What made you decide to step out on faith and do this?
One of the things that I remember when I had heard that Congressman Conyers possibly might be retiring, is I started calling folks. People were already calling me, so then I started calling my mentors and my close friends before I called anybody else back. But there is this sense of feeling needed at a moment now that's pretty dark in our country.
Amen to that.
Yeah, and I felt I couldn't stay silent anymore. I had to get back in the ring and fight back. And at that moment, it was so much in me. I mean, usually I hesitate. I ran for office 3 times before, successfully was a state representative for 6 years. Okay. But this felt different. This felt very much about not only this incredibly progressive policies, but I was so tired, not only with President Trump being in the White House and the corruption there that we see today, not only moral corruption, but also, what's happening day to day, the fact that he hasn't divested in his businesses and making decisions based on profit for his businesses versus the best interest of the American people, but also the corporate assault on our working families. Right. It has been so hard on our working families. It's been so hard to watch people lose their homes during the economic recession, some of them becoming renters for the first time in 20-something years. Right. So many of my schools shutting down in local neighborhoods because the for-profit entities and the corporations and the DeVos family have just hijacked our education system and made it into a for-profit entity. You see it now happening with our water systems. You continue to see it now. Even recently, you're just downstairs talking to my housing justice work groups about how, many of our folks said, okay, we can't get a regular mortgage. Let me get into a land contract. But now you got LLCs and corporations buying hundreds of homes off of our tax foreclosure list and turning around and scamming people through land contract schemes. So the corporate assault on our families is so real. We're being discriminated against by auto insurance industry. We've been left out to drive by, the big three, and no matter what people say, I love our labor community, but let's be honest, these are not the same jobs that my dad had when he worked at Ford Motor Company, at Flat Rock plant. These tier 1s, tier 3 process, everything, they're all pitting us up against each other. And we deserve access to thrive. We've been bailing out these corporations and these billionaires in the 1% for too long, and we've been left out. And people are saying, oh, now the economy's up and running. I said, I don't know. We don't feel it. People don't feel it.
Well, we're going to do a podcast later on, and it's going to be on underemployment. Me and Charles Daniels, and we're going to get some. You're definitely going to be talking to you about that as well, because really, the employment can be up, but if they're only $9 an hour jobs, it's underemployment because people can't survive. And I'm glad you made that point.
Yeah, it's poverty wages.
Yeah,
it really is. I mean, you're expecting people to pay exorbitant cost in auto insurance. People always tell me, well, Rashida, if we increase minimum wage, the price of goods will go up. I said, I don't know about you all, but the price of milk has been gone up. Like I go buy milk and it keeps going up 2 cents, 5 cents. All of a sudden it's almost $6 at some places to buy a gallon of milk.
Yeah, more than what gas costs. Yeah,
true.
that is a true statement.
But our wages haven't gone up, right? So,
well, no, and we don't even talk about that. Yeah, underemployment. So that's coming up. I've got my iPad here because you made 2 statements that I found very interesting. And one of them was, all of us deserve human dignity. The other one was, everyone deserves equality and justice. And I'm bringing those 2 statements up to say you have not just talked the talk, you're walking the walk. And during the campaign, we always get these campaign promises. Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. What I found out is we don't talk to our Congress people and be like, what are you doing while you're in office? And that's why I'm glad I'm sitting here talking to you, because you got some good stuff on the table. Can you talk to us about that,
Yeah,
please?
and I want listeners to know, raise the bar of what you expect of your member of Congress. Don't just call them to vote yes or no on legislation. Call them to help you with everyday challenges and issues. It is incredible, the agencies that my office and myself sometimes call, and they actually call me back. So, if you're sitting there trying to figure out what's going on with your building and it's a HUD housing, when we call HUD, they call us back. Use this office. But we created 4 neighborhood service centers, and it's been incredible to watch us change people's lives. I mean, I don't care if it's getting, DTE to get somebody's lights back on, to one of my veterans who became disabled, to help him through a program through VA to get his college debt, $121,000 wiped out.
Wow.
And another woman who, hearing aid wasn't included in her coverage, so we were able to find a federally accredited clinic that could help her. From a woman who became hearing impaired in over a year, struggling to get her Social Security benefits, and it took one call, and we found it was administrative error. And I mean, she's been trying to figure out what's going on. And within a week, she got $38,000 in back pay of Social Security. And
what?
And yeah, she wouldn't even sleep at night because she was so worried they're going to come and repo her car, and she was going to lose her home and everything that, she worked so hard. So when I talk about human dignity, I'm talking about making sure government is working for all of us. It should not be this hard to want to hear, to want to be taken care of when you are, now hearing impaired or disabled, that you served our country and you worked your butt off. And at the end, you're getting into the cycle of poverty that takes away a lot of, living in this kind of, peaceful mind of, like, especially these are like our last years on this earth. And so it is so important that we show the world what we can do, right? What is possible. And so what I did is I introduced the Boost Act. I had a Michigan and Families Roundtable, and these are folks from my SEIU workers were there, some Mothering Justice, and these incredible mamas that are out there pushing this, economic justice agenda, policy think tanks that are here in Michigan. It was an incredible group of folks, and we sat around the table and said, okay, we need to do something to elevate people out of poverty. And my district is the third poorest congressional district in the country. And for people to understand, this is 435 congressional districts. 13th district here in Michigan is the third from the bottom, the third poorest.
Are you for real?
No, for real. And if you ever come to, when I go door to door, I show people where the concentrated poverty is. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that really looks like. If you want, and so if we really want to elevate people and show people what is possible, you have to do it through like legislative kind of agenda items. And the Boost Act repeals the GOP Trump tax scam is what I call it. Because it really helped the 1%, the wealthy, these big corporate tax breaks. Think about it. We got GM leaving still, even though they got huge amounts of payouts for their shareholders through this, scam that was supposed to create jobs. And this. And when they say create jobs, like I love that you're talking about underemployment. It's important to talk about what kind of jobs are we talking about? Are these the kind of jobs you can stay at 20, 30 years and retire with some sort of dignity? Absolutely not. No. And so the Boost Act allows people that if you make less than $100,000, which is the majority of Americans, you can get up to $6,000 in a tax credit. And you can be a student, a caretaker, somebody on disability. You don't have to have these taxable income. It's different with the other tax breaks, the earned income tax credit. You had to be like working poor. This broadens the umbrella and repeals that. And that's how we pay for it is if you make less than $50,000 and you're single, you can get up to $3,000. And you can get it in payments. You can get it $250 a month or upfront. And again, it would help 45% of American people around the country right now. Wow. It would elevate them out of poverty. They're close to half of the population out of poverty. People are $400 away from an emergency to getting into the cycle of poverty. And we all know this. We feel it. We're living check by check. Right. Something happens to our car. Something's happening, where you have to get something for your child, all these other things. It is so hard because we're living to be with our families, to laugh, to love, to really truly live. But we shouldn't be living to work and, poverty and kind of jobs and that doesn't give us that access to really thrive. Mm-hmm. And look, my district, and it's not just because it's the 13 district strong, but we work hard. 30% of my residents are in the automotive industry, but I'm telling you, they turn around, they're now paying thousands of dollars for their insulin because their health care is getting cut. I have other family members that they're so afraid to even go to the doctors because they can't afford the copay or the deductible if they need surgery. We have an inhumane system out there in our healthcare system, all of that. The Boost Act would help so many incredible people that are deserving to show that government has to be about people and that we can shift this big tax break to the rich and to those for-profit entities that really don't need it right now. It's the regular folks that I know if I put even $200, $500 in their pocket, they turn around and spend it into our local economy. That's what fuels our local economy. That's what really fuels.
So let me ask you this. How long would these tax breaks be effective?
It would.
If this bill passes.
Yeah, if the Boost Act passed tomorrow, this would be a yearly credit.
When is the cutoff? Like the Trump tax has a cutoff. I think we're all going to be out of it in 6 years. I don't quote me on that, but it's supposed to have a cutoff where the corporations go forever. If this act passes, how long does will we have those tax?
Well, I keep it on this as a Boost Act. So the earned income tax credit and home heating credit. You see all those kinds of tax credits, and maybe on the state level or on the federal level, those stay there. So anybody can apply for them. So as long as you're, and again, it's a tax credit. So
it's no cutoff. You literally this passes
as long as I think we can find ways to pay for this. We've been able to find ways to pay for corporate tax breaks left and right. It seems like even during the recession we did it. We should be able to do something that, to me, we need a very strong, effective anti-poverty program in our country.
Yes.
It used to be through our education system, and they've hijacked that. Earned income tax credit really helped. What's one of the most effective ways, but it wasn't a broad enough umbrella that in so many of our folks that are even making less than 50 are still struggling to pay their auto insurance, thousands of dollars every 6 months, to healthcare costs that have gone up because they're covered from their employer, but that's not even the coverage. I mean, covering somebody is not the same because guess what? They have to pay, $1,000 in premiums, deductibles, and copay. And then don't get me started about prescription drugs. Yeah. And then the other thing is, I, as an attorney, I worked full time at a nonprofit organization while taking classes on the weekend and became an attorney because I really wanted to free people from oppression and maybe economic oppression, whatever it is. And I worked at nonprofit agencies. And one of the things I kept hitting a wall on is, we have the Civil Rights Act that we passed over 50 years ago. And the intention was, so when you have intentional discrimination, it's not as easy to show that, right? But if you can show that the impact of the policy, the impact of the system in place is actually discriminatory in practice, that should be enough to say that you have a civil rights violation. For many listeners, they don't know this, is that the courts became increasingly more conservative. And guess what? They took away our right to disparate impact, to show that an impact in itself is enough. Yep. Now we have to show this higher threshold of intentional discrimination. Guess what? We're not going to see some of those emails that say, "Well, look, hey, don't rent to black people," or "Hey, she's pregnant. Let's make sure we let go of her." We're not going to find that as easily. But if we can show disparate income, if we can show that there's some sort of pattern in the way the system is implemented or the way the practice is by the for-profit entity, maybe private or public sector, maybe even a government agency, like, inequity in education funding is the real detriment in our country right now, and that needs to be looked at. But we need to bring back what the true intent of the Civil Rights Act, which it was intended to say that disparate impact was enough to say that you're violating somebody's civil rights. So with the Boost Act, where is it at? What do our listeners need to do? I mean, because that's just one of the things. We're going to talk about some more, but where is it at right now? And what do our listeners need to do? Who do they need to call and say, push this through? Seriously. So, I'm really excited because I believe we have about 20 co-sponsors already for the Boost Act. Congratulations. Yeah. Wait a minute. Well, I think it's because poverty is sadly very real in all parts of the country. And I know that the Boost Act, when it was introduced, I believe it went to Financial Services, the Ways and Means Committee, I believe. Okay. The Ways and Means Committee. But at this point, if I'm your member of Congress in 13, great. I'm the primary sponsor. And I think a number of my colleagues in the Michigan delegation have already signed on. I know Congresswoman Debbie Dingell has. But if you are listening, and maybe wherever you are, check if your member of Congress has supported it and ask them to support this. Again, this is not just about middle class and working class. They do that to divide us. It's anybody that makes less than $100,000 would benefit from this Boost Act. And again, this is money that I know will fuel our local economy and really truly create real jobs for people, because I know every time I say to somebody, you just got this big tax break, what are you going to do with your income tax credit, whatever it is? They're like, well, I'm going to go fix my car. That's going to, keep or somebody. Home improvement. Oh my God. I love that you said that, because somebody's like, I'm going to go buy new carpet. I need new carpet. Yeah. All of those things people need to know help support our small businesses. When my father worked for GM out in a hydromatic plant, the one that just closed, as a matter of fact, that was his plant. And whenever he got his income tax check, he used to buy me and my sister bikes. That was his way of going, hey, we got some money, gonna get you a bike. I mean, I always got a bike. It's always it's like a secret savings account. Yeah, it really is. And if our government can play that role of creating this kind of tax credit that, at the end, you work hard, you're a good person, all of these things, you should be able to get that chunk of money. Just like, it shouldn't just be shareholders that we constantly support. It has to be regular folks that I know that when we uplift them, we all win. That's right. What other bills do you have on the table? So I just talked about Justice for All Civil Rights Act, which restores the Civil Rights Act and the fact that it's been watered down by the courts. We should be able to have access to show there's a civil rights violation if the practice or the laws or whatever the system that's in place is discriminatory in practice. That should be enough. And Justice for All Civil Rights Act is something I've been talking about for over a year now. And a number of, folks that are, part of the National Lawyers Guild, some even local organizations here like Sugar Law Center, Michigan Legal Services, all those folks, many of us have been able to show like housing discrimination through disparate impact. But guess what? In other areas, from education funding to what's going on with even our police, what's going on even in the banking industry, car insurance industry, is that if we can't show intentional discrimination, like I talked about the email or something that specifically says that's what they're intending to do, which is so difficult. It makes it impossible.
Right.
I mean, you could be a millionaire and still not be able to meet that threshold. But if you can show that the impact in itself on the ground is discriminatory in practice, that should be enough. I'll give you a great example. A lot of us were impacted by driver's license responsibility fee. And
yes. We had members lost their job because of that.
Absolutely.
They
My
didn't get
brother
the notice
did.
or anything, and then we couldn't fight it in the grievance level.
And they lost. They lost really access to economic stability for their family because you know this. Most of us can't get around to get to our jobs without a car, and so the driver's license responsibility fee may have been well intended. When it was, was it intendedly trying to discriminate against African American drivers, a low income driver? No, but in practice. It did.
Yes.
And so that should have been enough to say people's civil rights was violated. So the Civil Rights Act should have been able to be triggered, but it wasn't because of case law. Because again, the judges, and that's the thing, we can pass the Boost Act, we can pass all this stuff. Courts have become, and these conservative folks have stacked up the courts to now allowing these case decisions to interpret the law in a way that takes away our access to judicial system and to justice. And so I restore that after, there have been a very controversial case decision that said, nope, you got to only show intentional discrimination. Anything below that is, that's not enough, so forth. So now you can say that disparate impact is enough to show that somebody's civil rights act civil rights rights has been violated. And so it's been something that, Congressman John Lewis and Senator Ted Kennedy back in 2008 introduced something similar.
Okay.
Yes. But my bill, Justice for All Civil Rights Act, is much more expansive and allows a lot more private entities to be directly accountable to people's rights and making sure they're not discriminating.
Yeah, because they were, and I'm trying to think of the guy's name. He had did a letter, and he was talking about that they couldn't use the N-word no more. We have to use other languages. We have to use code words for pretty much for racism, unfortunately.
Yeah, they use proxies.
Lee Atwater. It might have been Lee Atwater.
Yeah.
It might have been Lee Atwater.
Yeah.
He made the statement. He says we can't use the N-word, but what we can do is say, all this other stuff and kind of disguise it. Yeah. And what your bill is actually doing is helping it where they can't disguise it like that anymore.
Oh yeah, and let me tell you, auto insurance. How many of us called? I just called yesterday to get a requote for my auto insurance. Right? I know it's unbelievable. Even your member of Congress is dealing with the discriminatory practices of the auto insurance industry. But they'll ask marital status. They'll ask about your credit. They look up your credit score.
What does that have to do with driving?
Education level. I mean, they ask, what's your highest education level achieved? It should be on driving factors. Why are they using these proxies? And think about it. I mean, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell just told me when, Congressman John Dingell passed away, her car didn't change, her address didn't change or anything. She became a widow. As soon as she became a widow, her insurance went up $2,000.
You know what? I talked to a guy. He was telling me the moment he turned 65, his insurance went up because he turned 65.
Yeah. Again, it should be based on people's driving record and their driving factor. University of Michigan did a study showing that somebody with drinking under the influence violation on their driving record who had a decent credit score, better credit score, with a guy that doesn't have a DUI, an okay, much less, better, not as great of a credit score, was paying 300% more than the guy drinking under the influence. Again, I can guess, looking at that, just the fact that if you did this and we were able to see who was directly impacted the most, it would probably be low income African Americans and really women. Women are paying much higher cost in auto insurance. And there's no correlation of why that's the case. No offense to my male colleague, but I think we drive just fine, and we should be looking at people's driving records, not their their gender and whether or not they're married.
You bring up a point. I'll never forget. I was at work. This was probably about 10 years ago, and this one guy I know had 2 DUIs. 2. He bought a brand new Corvette. It was like in 2004. And when he told me what he was paying for the Corvette, I was like, I cannot, because keep in mind, he had a good credit score, lived in a great area, in a rural area, really. But his Corvette was cheaper than everybody else's car in the room, and he had 2 DUIs.
Yeah, and he was paying much, much, much less than auto
he
insurance.
he was under $1,000 a year.
Oh yeah. Oh my God, I wish.
Yeah, under $1,000 a year. It was like, why you?
We can't allow these, for-profit entities like the auto insurance industry to use these proxies that really do hurt working families.
And you know what? Just for the sake of our audience, I was talking about the Lee Atwater. I did get that pulled up. It's the Lee Atwater infamous Southern strategy. That's what it was when he talks about that. And he said you can say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. It can be an abstract. So that's what he's talking about. If you look it up online, you can catch it. But it was I learned that, just talking with people, mentors and stuff, and it was just amazing. And it's exactly what you're saying about your bill. Your bill is going right into what he's fighting.
He can use that
doing.
language, but under my bill, we still can, if we can show that there is a disparate impact, that the impact of whatever policy that he's going to try to use code words for, is code words is just directly discriminating against African Americans and centered around just pushing them out and dehumanizing them. That would be enough to say there's a Civil Rights Act.
Got another story for you. So. Remember 9/11, right?
Yes.
So it was a guy. I was CWA. I was Secretary of Treasury at the time, and I was traveling for work. So I'm on the plane, and this guy comes on with a turban on, and we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, people were just kind of pissed off because he was on the same plane. Mm-hmm. So I'm sitting there, and I kind of wasn't paying attention. I'm got my iPad or whatever, and I'm just kind of like whatever, or computer. Might not have had an iPad back then. Finally, I just kind of look up, and we get on the plane. And when we get on the plane, I'm getting ready to get in my seat. I'm in my seat. The guy's sitting there. Now it's another guy. It's 2 guys sitting there. They didn't want to be next to him on the plane. Now, like I said, this was right after 9/11. Mm-hmm. So I'm sitting there, and I'm just like, wait a minute. So I kind of take my headphones. So I said, well, what's the problem here? Well, no, we're not. He's not going to be causing this plane to crash. Automatic. I mean, and one of the guys was a black guy, brother. So I look over at him. I said, so let me get this straight, man. You're going to do to him what's always done to us when we're followed around in stores. Well, man, I got to look out. I was like, dude, really? And that's why we need the bill that you have sitting on the table because of dumb stuff like that. Because even some of us forget, what we go through, and then we push it on somebody else.
It may not impact that moment.
No, it wasn't that moment, but I'm just saying.
But depending on how the airlines approached it, right? Depending on even government agencies that try to put people on these watch lists and everything, like what is the criteria there? Again, just looking at some of those practices. But I can tell you this, all that, it was happening on the airplane and, the tragedy of 9/11. I mean, I remember being at the nonprofit I was working at and just horrified to see what was happening, is that we all have to check each other and call each other out. I do it all the time with friends who may say things about our LGBTQ community or African Americans or even other immigrants.
Yes.
And I'm always pushing back and challenging people. And I think it's important for us to always can speak up and get people away from this fear mongering and from taking actions based on fear and checking themselves and maybe engaging each other in a very different way of maybe saying hello and seeing if he nods and smiles. I doubt somebody that wants to hurt you is going to do that, right? Or at least, taking a pause and being still. But I do understand people in our country are very fearful. I know for a fact that people now are worried about, the increase of white supremacy in our country and are always worried about now. I know Black churches are worried when a white male walks into a church now. And before they would be like, come on in and welcome. And now they're like, I wonder what's going to happen here. So there's a lot of, just the sadness of it all is, we're all these incredibly fellow Americans and our neighbors, all of us, we want to love each other. We want to accept each other. And then you have people kind of putting this green light out there, of feeling, making people feel less like they belong.
Well, you know what, and you're right, because church is the last place, or I'm gonna say religious organizations, because I always like to, include everyone, no matter what your background is. But for someone to come into your organization like that kid did and shot those people like that after prayer, after he spent the hour with them, it was horrific. I mean, that one really hurt my heart, because I mean, he just went in there. Them people are in there trying to make their lives better through their own beliefs. And at the end of the day, they lost their lives. So that just sucks for me. But let's get down to another one of your bills, because we can talk about justice for all day long, right?
Yes.
We could just do a whole podcast on that. But you got what other bill do you have that's on the table? The hardest working Congresswoman in Congress. And let me say this, Michigan is very proud of you.
Oh, thank you.
When I was telling people that we were going to be doing this interview, I've got people now going, when is it going to drop? When is it going to drop? When is it going to drop? And it's just like, they're like, because she is the greatest. They saw you on TV on Seth Meyers and CNN and all the good stuff. So it's you're one of us.
Yeah,
the reason why
I really do feel, when I come home, I feel like, okay, everything's going to be okay, because it's really difficult when you have, a class of people out there that are big, huge followers of the racist in the White House right now, and they will try to discredit you and try to label you a certain way, even though you really are trying to come from a place of love and respect, really try to uplift people out of poverty, and really have a real policy agenda, let's just move things and fix things for people, because these are years in time we can't get back for our families. But when I land here, I'm like, okay, I can finally breathe. And because this is where I was raised. I've always been a Wayne County girl, born and raised in Detroit. I'm so proud of the strength I have. I remember
Detroit.
I know, but even when I remember my mother, she still has a very heavy accent, right? And my mom would kind of whisper, and some of the black mothers would be like, no, speak up, like no, people need to hear you.
That's right.
And I will never forget that. I will never forget the fact that even when I was like, maybe I don't belong here, maybe I should wait. There was moments where I'm like, no, I have every right to say something right now, and that's wrong, and you shouldn't do that. And so I sometimes speak up, and it comes, and I don't care. It does sometimes come from a place of like anger and passion that I think is felt among my neighbors all throughout the 13th district. They're upset too that we can't get things done quicker. There's this lack of sense of urgency. But I'll tell you, we talked about Justice for All Civil Rights Act, but the two bills go after the auto insurance industry. PAID Act, which is prevention of auto insurance discrimination. Okay. And it says you can't use non-driving factors, period. And, I worked with this incredible Congress member out of New Jersey, Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman, and I introduced the bill together. We've been really trying to pump it up, and educating people, because people are shocked to know that their marital status, their education level, their zip codes, their credit, scores are all being used towards their auto insurance rates. Yep. It should not be at all part of that. And it's, it's discriminatory in its practice. And it really does hurt majority of working class folks. I see this person who he was in Redford Township, this guy who's like, you could tell he's going through his bills and he's looking up. He's like, I just don't understand. It just keeps going up $350 every single time. It just keeps going up automatically. I don't know what's going on. And another woman who's in tears and says, I worked for Beaumont for 25 years. She's over 55 years old. She doesn't have anything on her driving record. And she says, as soon as she retired, her insurance went up $350. I think it was actually closer to $400. Mm-hmm. She was in tears, and she said, I don't understand. And I told her, it's probably because you're in a fixed income and your credit score was impacted by it. And she just looked at me shocked. And I said, if it's not that, it's going to be something else. Again, we shouldn't allow the auto insurance industry to use these as ways to up our the price of covering us as drivers. It has to be driving factors, period. Yes,
and so I agree with you on that one. Yeah. And then here's the thing, you kind of remind me of us union stewards, because we're not working the overtime because we're fighting the cause, right?
Yes.
You're fighting the cause, and you're always talking to people and doing great stuff. And the three bills so far you have talked about, they're directly helping the common man. I'll call it like that, not the little man, but the common man, because we make up 99% of the United States, and we're not the 1%, right?
Yeah. No, and for folks that are listening, I mean, majority of my colleagues are millionaires. You know, they're in an income bracket that's completely disconnected with the American people. I think people don't know that about Congress right now, between the Senate and the House members. The new class is phenomenal. And I think the largest incoming class since Watergate, ironically. And but they're incredible because some have never had health insurance until they got there. They've never been in public office before. They're not millionaires.
Stop. Hold on. You can't just glaze over that. Real talk. You can't glaze over that. You're telling me that some of our elected officials just got health insurance when they got elected.
So one of the first Native American women historically elected, Sharice Davids from Kansas, her first time ever having health coverage was when she got elected to the United States Congress. So, I mean, it tells you that, something's broken and something's wrong. And she, what I've been hearing from my colleagues, majority of them being these incredible, fierce women, is, Lucy Macbeth out of Georgia. She was a flight attendant for Delta for years, ran for Congress, had never held office before, won. And her sole purpose is to bring justice to her son. And, her son, Jordan, was her only son, and she lost him to gun violence. Somebody came up to him at a gas station, just shot him dead. And that's what she's been working on, is gun reform. She was part of Moms Demand Action and a lot of these incredible groups. And now that's what she runs. And I love that. I love that, one, she's not in that income class that's completely disconnected, but more importantly, she's there on a mission as a mother, not even just like as a Democrat or Republican, but she's there as a mother saying, we got to do something about this particular issue. And then you have Lauren Underwood out of Illinois, who has a pre-existing condition and talks about the importance of really protecting that and not allowing our healthcare system to move closer to, it already is such an inhumane process. It's just an unjust process right now that's happening with our healthcare system. But yet there's incredible, I don't know if you all know Katie Porter out of California. She's a survivor of domestic violence, a mother of 3 children. Again, incredible class. That, yes, we're diverse in our ethnicity and a lot of first, but more importantly, I think, even as important maybe, is the fact that we also have diverse experiences and challenges. And I like that some of my colleagues have never held office before. I think that's actually refreshing.
Well, but see, here's the good thing. You all now are in office, and as you get your experience, the next go around, you can do just that much better because you're not in a learning curve. Mm-hmm. That's the only bad part. It's kind of a learning curve because you got to go, I want to do this like this. Like, no, you can't do it that way. You got to go this way. But the next go around, you all are going to be fantastic and great. Not that you're not already fantastic and great. So let me say that. But it's always good to get better and better and better. Like I said, you just remind me of a good union steward that, you go right up to management and look them in the face, especially that president of yours. I'm going to give them to you.
We sometimes call him individual one. Just
I think Joe Madison calls him slick.
Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley calls him the occupant of the White House. She just doesn't. It very much feels like he's disgraced the office to the point where he doesn't even deserve the title.
Yeah, but you know what? Here's what I do like about this show in particular. That he's not the main topic. We're making side jokes, which is cool, but we're talking about the work that you're doing. And this isn't campaign promises. You got these 3 bills on the table, and it's just a matter of just getting them to do what we got to do. Let me ask you this. I'm going to go off the beaten path here. How do we get our people to realize what we need to do for the Senate? Hopefully I always get the House and Senate mixed up. The Senate, because the Senate is still Republican.
Yes.
How do we get it? Because here's the thing. I don't need everything to be all Democrat. I would love it. That would be great because everybody's on my team, right? Mm-hmm. Even if it's 50-50, that makes people have to work together. Sure. But when I got 75% of it, I don't have to work with you. So what's some advice that you can give our people out there that they can, this election is very important.
Absolutely. And I think when people look back at this time, they're going to realize that, Senator Mitch McConnell will probably go down in history of somebody that has, not put the American people first. I can't believe you have a button that does that. That's hilarious.
Look,
But
let me tell you
I
something.
think when history looks back at this moment, it would not look very favorable at Senator Mitch McConnell, who, we were talking about hundreds of bills that are sitting there right now. Not only really amazing bills like fight for, increasing $15 minimum wage to $15 and all these incredible things around, helping with dreamers, many of our young people that grew up here that need to be able to have access to legalization in our country, all those things. But it also has all the appropriations budgets. That all of those bills are in there just sitting there.
Can he hold these bills up?
All of them.
So he has right now.
Right
he has
now
the
he
power.
has. I don't think he's passed anything in about 2.5 months or so.
So he has the power to hold down these 3 bills we talked about. That's
it has to
very,
go through
very
the
important.
Senate, yeah.
Oh my!
And let me tell you, if you look at even what we've been able to pass, much of them had bipartisan support. I mean, even some of the ones around gun reform and all these other, we've actually were able to get, and it might not be a ton, but some sort of bipartisan support when you talked about, we need a little bit of both in trying to make sure it's balanced.
Yes.
I feel like there was really good intentions on the House representatives, at least making sure that we got there. And I thought we did on a number of bills, but as soon as it gets to the Senate, it goes into this, non-movement
Dark
mode.
void.
Yeah. And it doesn't.
Black
it doesn't
hole
run.
in the space.
I mean, I think even now, Senator McConnell has an opponent now that's been running these ads about how he, there's this fund that's supposed to help coal miners that now are really dying of lung disease. And they all took a bus to go see him, and he gave them like 1 minute. And they were so devastated. And I
do not agree.
Yeah, they were so devastated, and this is a fund that hasn't been funded adequately and everything. But he was able to do very quickly the GOP tax scam that helped the wealthy and the corporations, but couldn't rally, and the amount of power that he has, couldn't rally enough to help the coal miners in Kentucky that are really, literally in their deathbeds. They're asking to please be able to take care of their families, to live with some sort of human dignity their few years that they probably have left, and want to be able to take care of themselves. And so we're dealing with there's some sort of I think there lacks a moral compass there.
A stone wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a wall that's just up there.
These are just not bills that they impact people, real people, and all around the country. Do something. Put them up for a vote. If you're going to let them fail, then let us, all the American people, see it fail. Like, we want to know where everybody is at on these issues.
Now, you brought up coal, and I read something that one of your assistants gave me about petroleum coke.
Oh, yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
For
please?
many of you that pass over 75, going to Toledo or through Detroit to Toledo.
And you get that smell now.
Yeah. No, that's important to mention the smell.
Oh, okay.
I thought that smell was normal growing up in Southwest Detroit. But
yeah, I did
right
too.
there at the plant, you can see they expanded back, I think, in 2008, the Marathon Petroleum refinery there. And they're now pumping in tar sands from Canada. Dirtiest crude oil in the country, and they're bringing it in, and they're producing what they call petroleum coke, or sometimes they call it Meta Coke, whatever. I sometimes say I don't care. They call it Coke milkshake. The point is, it's really toxic. And
that's a byproduct of oil refinement.
That's
correct?
Right.
Okay,
that's
cool.
right. Very
cool.
good. Very
Thank
good
you,
job.
my brother.
That's right. And you should see how much. I think it's like gallons and gallons of water they use just to produce it. And it's these small pebbles. They look like coal, but they're much more refined. And they have this coker on the refinery, the plant there, and they produce it. And they have, I think, a 20-year contract with the Koch brothers to purchase most of it. And so they had this, I don't know, this company came in contract with Marathon, and the Koch, they call it the Koch Carbon Company, which is Koch brothers. And they produced it, then transported it, and had put it on the riverfront. They literally put it on the West Riverfront, right there on Rosa Parks and 4th Street, right there. And people in Canada were calling our office saying, what is that big black dust? Because if folks remember this, there was this big cloud of black, like just a cloud of dust. It was just, because they couldn't contain it. It was just all over the place. It was awful.
I do remember that.
Yeah. And they did it without a permit. It was on Maddie Maroon's property. And no one seemed to know where it came from. We finally got the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality involved, Mayor Bing at the time, everyone, and nobody could figure out what it was.
That.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so this issue, it's still being produced, right? And they want to be able to openly store it. Well, I was able to get it tested independently. I got some samples on that property, and they found out there was carcinogenic, all that. Why that was important is because even the state, before Flint, even the state was telling me it's not toxic. Well, when I got it independently tested and came back with the results of it, they said, okay, Representative Tlaib, it is toxic if it's not contained, which is very bizarre, right? And so then we started pushing, saying,
whoa, don't fly over that one. You said it's what now? Is
Michigan Department of Environmental Quality
said it's
not toxic.
It's not toxic.
It's not toxic. It's not on the toxic list of the EPA. It's not toxic. It's not toxic. I said, what are you talking about? It's byproduct of
the oil refinement.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's not.
So I literally got Ziploc bags, sent it to the Ecology Center, which is in Ann Arbor, an incredible organization. They get it tested. I released the test results, which shows that it had carcinogenic and all these toxins that create cancer and can get into people's lungs and create respiratory issues and all these kinds of things. And so when I released that, that's when they revised their opinion and said it's only toxic if it's not contained. And that helped kind of push at least the city and everybody to understand the public health impact of it. But we were able to get them to remove it based on land use violations versus the actual public health impact. But you should know, we tested people's homes. There was these apartments and studios that were like right there. That behind it was the piles.
Okay.
And there, people found it on their kitchen sink sponge, the little dish sponge. Yep. And one woman who is I think 8 months pregnant, found it on her window seal.
What?
Yes. It was just blowing up everywhere. And I remember the Ecology Center coming back and testing even near the bus stops and seeing as far as all the way on the other side of the building on the bus stop that was down the street. And sure enough found, petroleum coke there. Why? Because even the trucks, when they were transporting it from Marathon Oil Refinery from 48217 or original Southwest Detroit is what I like to call it, or Melvindale area, they were bringing it down Fort Street and all that debris on the tires is just getting everywhere. And again, this small refined product, it's so, I don't know if people realize petroleum coke is so toxic that they can't even burn it here. So they ship it off to China.
It just gets worse, right?
Yeah, but that's why one of my bills with Senator Gary Peters is we got to look at best practices of how we store this product. I already know they're going to come back and say it has to be fully contained in some sort of a containment that's probably completely like a barn almost. But yeah, it's and for them to dump that much even on the riverfront, you should know the water runoff, the complaints we were getting from people, the fact that, I watch my residents sitting there fishing right next to the piles, right on the West Riverfront and not even having any idea that they were next to these toxins.
Congresswoman, I know, you know what, you done been here a while. I'm not going to drag this out long, but you know what, we really appreciate you coming on the show. You got a lot of bills going on. You did say you had 20?
I think I have 11 bills
11?
so far
Okay,
introduced.
all right.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Hopefully we can get you back and we can talk about some more of those bills, because here's the thing. We want to educate people all across the country of what's going on, what you're doing. I personally don't want our Congresswoman just to be known for the stuff that's going on in the news on CNN when, about Israel or what you said about Trump, not that stuff. Yeah. Let's talk about the nuts and bolts that you do, the stuff that really matters for us. And another thing that you brought up in this podcast that we really got to think about is how do we get the Mitch out of there?
Yeah.
How do we get somebody to run? Do all of us need to go down to, because he's from where, Kentucky?
Yeah, no, there's a pretty, it looks, I can't remember her name right now, but I know somebody's running against him right now.
So do we need to go down there and do some door knocking? Do we all of us need to kind of get together?
I love groups like, one of the things for listeners to know this, nothing has transformed real change in our country. It's created just some transformation in our country, or real change in our country from a bill or from what's happened in the halls of Congress. It has always happened with movement work outside of the halls of Congress, from the civil rights, movement work, from women's rights movement. All of that happened because of the outcry outside of Congress, the halls of Congress, outside of the White House. All of those social changes that I think led us to, the Older Americans Act. I was talking to somebody about that, and I said, I bet you that came about because, people started speaking up and saying things, we got to do something about this. All that stems from movement work outside of Congress. And yes, we should obviously be advocating for the Senate to pull up these bills, have committee hearings on them before the end of the year. But I know this much is that Moms Demand Action recently did like 100, local events across the country, over 100 events about doing something about the gun crisis in our country and moving some of those bills. That's the way to do it. Work with local organizations. If it's really important for you to have, some sort of access to home ownership in your community, you want to see that, get involved in your neighborhood block club, get involved in those groups and really elevate the human impact of what doing nothing looks like. That's the other thing is we know the impact, but it's because nothing has been done to address some of these chronic issues in our community. And
you know what the thing is with the, what was really kind of the angriest I got with the, our government was when President Obama picked a Supreme Court judge, and they just let it just ride through and let this guy pick that one. And I'm sorry, I'm still like, how is this still going on? How did he get away with that? Why is there no?
Because people need to realize there's consequences when you vote. If you result in
good point. I'm glad you said that. That is the consequences of the way we've as a collectively.
There's consequences. I mean, everything we do outside of these halls, the halls of Congress, outside of the White House, all matters, and that includes voting. Everything. We have to show the people power. And I know in my district, when I saw 60% increase in voter turnout was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way to do it.
Great.
I truly believe there's more people like us that are, logical, that love each other, that really believe that, people have to come before profit, that really understands what it feels like with the corporate assault on working families right now. I mean, it's a real assault, and it's all come up in these fancy names and these little ads, and they're trying to brainwash it. These are, this is corporate greed, which is very much a disease that has infested into our education system and our, the mass incarceration that you see really, really just, expanding across this country. What's happening definitely with what's going on with housing, what's going on with the car insurance industry, all of it can always be tied into the healthcare system. All of it can be tied into corporate greed.
The consequences of our vote.
Yes.
I like that. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, thank you for coming on LaborVision. We really, really appreciate you taking your time out of your day.
Thank you.
We're about to play some music here for you so you can get out of here. And hey, thank you everyone for listening to our podcast. Just remember to go to LaborVision.org and also American Workers First.org, where you can see this on YouTube. Until next time, take care. Have a good one. Bye.